Imagine being a captured German soldier in 1944, thousands of miles from home in the American heartland. You've spent years being told that Americans are your mortal enemies, brutal, vengeful people who will show you no mercy. Then one Sunday afternoon, something happens that shatters every belief you've held about war, captivity, and your enemies. An American farmer approaches you after a long day of work in his fields. You brace yourself for harsh orders or cold dismissal. Instead, he does something that leaves you speechless. He invites you into his home for Sunday dinner, not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a guest at his family table. The invitation seems impossible. In Nazi Germany, such hospitality toward enemy prisoners would be unthinkable, dangerous, even treasonous. Yet here is this American farmer, looking you in the eye and saying words that will haunt you forever. "Son, you've worked hard today. My wife's got a roast in the oven, and there's plenty for everyone. Would you like to join us?" What happens next will transform not just your understanding of America, but your entire worldview about humanity, enemies, and the power of simple kindness in the midst of global war. Based on documented historical accounts from over 400,000 German POWs held in the United States, 1943-1947. The prisoners who expected hell to understand the profound impact of these Sunday dinner invitations, you need to know what these German soldiers expected from American captivity. Historical context from Nazi propaganda. For years, German soldiers had been fed specific lies about American brutality. Americans would torture and starve prisoners. Enemy civilians would show nothing but hatred and vengeance. Democratic societies were weak but cruel to their enemies. No mercy would be shown to those who had fought against America. The reality they encountered from U.S. War Department records and POW testimonials. When German prisoners arrived at American camps scattered across Texas, Nebraska, Iowa, and other states, they discovered something that defied every expectation. The scale of American abundance, vast ports filled with cranes and warehouses brimming with goods trains rolling ceaselessly along tracks, through unburned countryside, small towns with white church spires and families strolling peacefully, landscapes untouched by war, endless rows of corn and peaceful farms. The camp conditions based on National Archives documentation. Over 400,000 German POWs housed in facilities following Geneva Convention standards, orderly wooden barracks with proper bunks and blankets, regular meals exceeding what German civilians received back home, access to medical care, education, sports, and even entertainment from preserved POW memoirs. One prisoner later wrote, "The food alone astonished us. Meat, bread, milk, and even fruit. The portions were more generous than anything I had eaten since the early years of the war." The work program that changed everything. Why were enemy prisoners working outside the camps? From historical labor shortage documentation. With millions of American men deployed overseas, the U.S. faced acute labor shortages, particularly in agriculture. The government authorized supervised work programs allowing German POWs to work on American farms. The initial tension. American farmers had never seen German soldiers except in propaganda photos. German prisoners stepped into unknown territory among enemy civilians. Both sides approached these arrangements with wariness and suspicion. What changed the dynamic? From documented accounts by farmers and prisoners. German work ethic. Many prisoners had grown up on farms in Bavaria, Saxony, or Prussia. They handled plows, tractors, and livestock with practiced skill. Shared labor. Working side by side broke down barriers. Americans saw these weren't monsters, but young men who laughed, worked hard, and showed genuine care for animals and crops. From preserved accounts, Kansas, Nebraska, and Texas farmers described how POWs returned to camps carrying apples, bread, or slices of pie offered by grateful farm wives. The realization. One farmer later recalled, "I expected to hate them. Instead, I found myself learning their names, hearing stories about their villages back home, and seeing them as young men caught up in something bigger than themselves. The first invitations, a leap of faith. How did Sunday dinner invitations begin? From documented family accounts and historical records, the invitation started small and grew, gradually. Stage, basic refreshments, water, and bread offered during fieldwork, coffee on porches. After long days, simple gestures of human decency. Stage 2, extended hospitality. Hot lunches served in kitchens, prisoners invited inside. American Homes Trust building through consistent good behavior. Stage 3, Sunday dinners. Full family meals with prisoners as honored guests. Integration into American family. Traditions, cultural exchange around dining tables. The risk Americans took from local newspaper accounts and military records. Some townspeople disapproved, considering it dangerous. Military authorities sometimes frowned upon such familiarity. Families defending their actions as Christian hospitality, not political sympathy. The prisoner's shock. From preserved POW diaries, being invited inside wasn't just about food, it was about dignity. They were no longer just laborers behind fences, but guests welcomed as part of households. One prisoner wrote, "Stepping across the threshold of an American home was alien and unforgettable. We sat at polished wooden tables, saw framed family photographs, smelled coffee freshly brewed. Sunday in rural America, a sacred ritual, understanding the cultural significance." From historical documentation of American rural traditions. In rural America, Sunday wasn't just another day. It was the rhythm of life. Families rose early for church services, fields lay still in observance, kitchens came alive with roasting meat, fresh bread, and cooling pies. Extended family gathered for elaborate midday meals. What German prisoners encountered. From multiple documented accounts. The setting, white. Tablecloths stretched across wooden tables, polished cutlery, and sometimes lit candles. The careful attention to presentation that honored both God and guests. The food, bowls of mashed potatoes, and platters of roast chicken, fresh butter, a luxury in wartime Europe. Homemade bread still warm from ovens, pies filled with apples or cherries from local orchards. The atmosphere. For men accustomed to military rations and camp kitchens, this abundance seemed almost unreal. More shocking than the food was the intimacy, being seated beside people whose nation was at war with theirs. Children, the bridge builders. The role of American children in breaking down barriers. From preserved family accounts and POW memoirs. Children played a crucial role in humanizing these encounters. Innocent. Curiosity. American children asked German prisoners questions without fear. They tugged at sleeves and requested simple German words. Their innocent acceptance, disarmed, battle-hardened. Soldiers shared activities. From documented accounts, prisoners carved wooden toys from firewood pieces. German soldiers taught children simple crafts. One Nebraska memoir recalls a POW carving a small horse for a farmer's daughter. The emotional impact, many German soldiers had left families behind. American children reminded them of sons and daughters they might never see again. From preserved letters, one prisoner wrote about feeling his heart break and heal simultaneously when an American child climbed onto his lap during Sunday dinner. The prayer that united enemies. The most powerful moment of Sunday dinners. From multiple documented accounts. The ritual of grace. American families bowed their heads before meals, giving thanks not only for food, but sometimes for the safety of those gathered, including their German guests. The impact on prisoners. From preserved testimonials. Hearing prayers spoken aloud, including blessings for those far from home, humbled the German POWs. It reminded them of their own family traditions when mothers and fathers had prayed for sons gone to war. The moment of unity. In those quiet shared moments of reverence, the boundaries of nationality seemed to blur. Former enemies sat together in acknowledgement of something greater than their conflict. One prisoner later wrote, "In that moment of prayer, I realized we served the same God, despite serving different countries." Cultural exchange. Around American tables, what happened beyond the meals? From documented family accounts and prisoner memoirs. Language barriers. Overcome, conversations stumbled through fragments of English and German. Hand gestures and smiles bridged. Communication gaps. German-American families often served as natural interpreters. Musical connections. Prisoners brought harmonicas or small accordions to dinner. German folk songs filled American living rooms. Families introduced POWs to American hymns. And swing music laughter erupted when Germans tried to mimic Glenn Miller or Bing Crosby food as cultural bridge. German prisoners shared recipes remembered from home. American families learned to make traditional rye bread POWs, tasted chili for the first time, often with amusing results. Cooking techniques were exchanged across enemy lines, shared stories. Germans described orchards, forests, and harvest festivals back home. Americans talked about rationing, air raid drills, and missing family. Members both sides discovered common struggles that transcended national borders. The controversy and support. Not everyone approved of these dinners. From newspaper archives and community records. The opposition. Some townspeople believed it dangerous to allow Nazis into private homes. Local newspapers carried editorials warning against becoming too familiar with prisoners. Concerns about security and appropriate patriotic behavior. The defense. From documented community responses. Religious justification. Churches spoke of Christian duty. To show mercy even to enemies, pastors preached about demonstrating American values through actions. What would Jesus do? Became a common response to critics. Practical arguments. Farmers defended their actions based on prisoners, good behavior, and hard work. "They work like my own sons," became a common refrain. The efficiency and reliability of German farm workers spoke for itself. Military tolerance. From official military records, Army authorities generally allowed these practices to continue, recognizing that content prisoners were less likely to cause problems and that community goodwill was valuable. The memories that lasted. Lifetimes, what these dinners meant to German prisoners. From extensive post-war interviews and memoirs. Psychological impact. Sunday dinners became the highlight of captivity for many prisoners. They represented dignity restored and humanity recognized. The memories provided hope during difficult moments in camp's spiritual significance. Many prisoners later said these meals were more spiritually meaningful than any church service they had attended under Nazi control. Long-term influence. From documented testimonials, these dinners shaped how former POWs raised their children, emphasizing the importance of seeing humanity in supposed enemies, lessons of tolerance and forgiveness. The power of simple kindness to overcome hatred from preserved correspondence. One former prisoner wrote to his American host family in the 1960s, "Your Sunday table taught me more about Christianity than 12 years of Nazi propaganda could destroy." The return home and lasting legacy. When the war ended and repatriation began. From historical repatriation records, 4/6/1947, what prisoners carried home. German POWs returned not just with belongings, but with stories that contradicted everything their families expected to hear about American brutality. Family reactions. Wives expected tales of starvation and cruelty. Instead, they heard about Sunday dinners with enemy families, children's laughter and homemade pies, prayers said in American kitchens that included German prisoners' kindness that seemed impossible during wartime. The broader impact. From historical analysis of post-war attitudes, These personal testimonies subtly prepared the ground for German acceptance of American occupation policies, post-war reconciliation between former enemies, success of Marshall Plan reconstruction efforts, the development of strong German-American diplomatic ties, continuing connections. From documented correspondence and visits, some former prisoners maintained contact with their American host families. Letters and postcards crossed the Atlantic for decades. A few POWs returned to America as tourists or immigrants in the 1960s-70s. Hand-carved toys and pressed flowers became family treasures passed down through generations. The historical significance. Why these Sunday dinners matter to history. From academic analysis and military studies. Strategic success. Without intending it as propaganda, these dinners accomplished what no military strategy could. Changed enemy attitudes toward American values, demonstrated democratic principles in action, created positive associations with American society, generated favorable testimony about American character, cultural bridge building. The meals represented practical reconciliation. Enemies learning to see each other. As human beings, shared values discovered across national boundaries, religious and cultural connections that transcended warfare, seeds of post-war cooperation planted at kitchen tables. The American achievement. From historical documentation, America's treatment of German POWs, exemplified by these Sunday dinners, demonstrated confidence in democratic values strong enough to extend to enemies, security so robust it could afford generosity, cultural strength that didn't require cruelty to prove itself, Christian principles guiding policy even during total war conclusion. When humanity conquered hatred. The documented story of German prisoners of war sharing Sunday dinners with American families represents one of World War II's most remarkable examples of how simple human kindness can transform enemies into friends. These men arrived on American soil as defeated soldiers, carrying years of Nazi propaganda about American brutality and godlessness. They expected starvation, torture, and endless humiliation at the hands of their captors. Instead, they found abundance so great that America could feed its enemies better than Germany fed its own citizens. They discovered security so confident that civilian families could welcome armed enemy soldiers into their homes. They encountered faith so genuine that former foes could bow their heads together in prayer. The Sunday dinner table became an unlikely classroom where German soldiers learned that everything their government had told them about America was wrong. The white tablecloths, the steaming platters of food, the children's innocent laughter, the family prayers that included blessings for those far from home. These simple American traditions became the most powerful weapons in the Allied arsenal. Not weapons of destruction, but weapons of transformation. Not tools of conquest, but instruments of reconciliation. For thousands of German prisoners, the taste of American apple pie became more memorable than any battle. The sound of grace before meals echoed longer than artillery fire. The sight of American children playing freely became more significant than any military victory. When these men returned to a devastated Germany, they carried with them something more valuable than their possessions. They carried proof that enemies could become friends, that hatred could be overcome by hospitality, that even in humanity's darkest conflicts, the light of simple human decency could still shine through. Their stories, whispered in German families for generations, helped prepare the ground for post-war reconciliation. Their testimonies about American kindness made the Marshall Plan possible. Their memories of Sunday dinners in Iowa farmhouses made the NATO alliance believable. The war ended, but the legacy of those meals lasted lifetimes. They proved that sometimes the most important victories aren't won on battlefields, but around kitchen tables, where former enemies discover they're simply human beings who share the same hopes, fears, and need for grace. In the end, America's greatest triumph wasn't defeating Germany's armies. It was winning Germany's heart, one Sunday dinner at a time.